everybody. I am Nisha Parveen, representing Trade Promotion Council of India, and I extend a warm welcome to each of you to this exclusive Tech Trailblazers series. Everybody must have heard about ChatGPT, but I'm sure you will learn a lot in our today's interaction. So we have with us Mr. Abhinav Chetan, founder of Dedicated and Digital for Nonprofits, a digital marketing and a GenAI expert with 15 years of experience. He spent 12 years working for Google, working with large brands, startups and agencies in the US, UK and India market. As a digital marketing expert, he has also mentored over a dozen startups across gaming, fintech and agri-tech for the global and India Google Startup Accelerators. As an entrepreneur and marketing expert, he is using tools like ChatGPT, VAR, in the field of generative AI, and many more. He was recently recognized as one of the top 40 marketeers in India by Business World in 2022. And he runs a personal engagement platform at abhinavchetan.com. In today's interaction, we will ascertain Mr. Abhinav Chetan's perspective about GenAI's economic potential and vision for GenAI in coming years. Also, his views on leveraging GenAI for small enterprises in India. Sir, welcome to the platform on India Business and Trade.
Thank you so much.
We are deeply honored to have your presence here, and we extend our heartfelt gratitude for graciously sparing your time amidst this busy schedule.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for having me.
So, without any further ado, we'll start with questions. My first question to you. So, you are the founder of Dedicated and Digital for Nonprofits. Please share some insights, into these ventures and what inspired you to start them.
Right. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure and a privilege for me, while you saying that it's an honor for you. I love doing these interactions where we can share what we've learned. So I spent 12 years at Google, worked with large brands in the US, in UK, as well as in India. And what I saw was that digitization was able to create deep value and impact for them. And while I was at Google, one of the things which we were allowed to do was something called 20% projects, where we could, in our spare time, which we didn't have enough of, go and work with whoever else we would like. That's where I got a chance to interact with a lot of nonprofits, with startups, as well as to teach. So those are the three things which are now extending themselves as brands in our portfolio. So you mentioned Digital for Nonprofits, where we use technology grants, digital marketing and generative AI. We put them together to help nonprofits become self-reliant. With Dedicated, we bring our expertise, which we've now acquired over years, across different platforms to help brands accelerate their digital marketing maturity. So we see ourselves as a best-in-class advisory, working with startups and MSMEs. And in my personal capacity, as you'd mentioned, abhinavchetan.com, I've been taking a lot of what we've learned and experienced on digital marketing and generative AI to institutions, to brands, as well as to individuals. So yeah, for us, the vision and mission, personally as well to me, is to be able to take leverage to people and brands using digital marketing and generative AI. Because a lot of what I saw and I learned is not very accessible and is not very easy for these sorts of brands to access. So that's what inspired us to create what we have right now. It's been about 3 years, and I wouldn't do anything differently.
Oh, that sounds interesting. So moving on, my next question to you. As a GenAI expert, how do you perceive the potential economic contribution of GenAI to Indian economy and Indian businesses? And how is India placed to benefit vis-a-vis other major economies in the world?
Right. I think first of all, we need to rephrase the term GenAI expert I don't think there is one person who is an expert on all that is happening in GenAI. I would call myself a GenAI enthusiast, a GenAI learner. Coming to how is that related to India? India is also something which is a passion for me. And I intentionally stayed back in India while a lot of my colleagues were taking opportunities outside because I feel India is a place to be. Now let's deconstruct what's happening in GenAI. Let's also talk about what's happening in India, and then we can put the two together. I think within generative AI, it's in fact a subset of AI overall, and AI has existed for a long time. It's just that it was always behind the scenes. We never noticed it as such. Only in the last 1.5 years, AI has become front and center because it is A, creating, and it is B, in the hands of everybody. This was not something which was happening previously, and that's why all the attention, all the investments in generative AI. How is this different from what AI does? AI was a lot about analysis, recognition, recommendation, but now it's suddenly able to, on the basis of all of what it's learned, also create. And this creation is happening not just in one format. We've seen it create text, images, video, audio, and more now. And that's why it is quite unique. Think of generative AI as, to use an analogy, a world-class kitchen which understands how to create any kind of cuisine, any kind of recipe, anywhere in the world. And it has learned all of this from previous experience, from analysis, as well as from recognition. Now, how you use it is completely dependent on how you prompt it, and you may have heard this term. You'll probably encounter a lot of these terms which we never heard before, GPT and GAN and LLM
Yes.
and tokens. So a lot of these are complex algorithms and technologies which are working behind the scenes to make us give access to that world-class kitchen where we can, at any point in time, ask it to create something for us. So let's say you want to eat a South Indian breakfast tomorrow. You invoke that part of this world-class kitchen for it to be able to give you a South Indian recipe in the context and in the style you want it to. So this was not possible before, and it is now possible. So that is what makes generative AI so exciting. Coming to India, from a general macroeconomic perspective, there are many things going for us. Look at our GDP growth. From a size of country perspective, we're still growing at 6 to 7%. Then, if you look at other indicators like our median age is only 28 to 29 years old. So we have that demographic advantage as a country. In addition to that, look at our digital infrastructure. I was reading somewhere that UPI now processes over 350 million transactions on a daily basis, which is a large percentage of transactions happening globally. We have the cheapest data in the world. If you think about that, the cost of 1 GB data in India is cheaper than anywhere else in the world. And we still have 35% of our population which is unconnected. Currently about 800 million people who are connected. When you put all of these things together, the kind of things which are possible now in India are not possible anywhere else. And this makes it very, very interesting as well as very, very exciting. Now, if you layer generative AI with this kind of ingredients that India possesses, then I personally think there's a revolution in the making. But to also speak of how will it impact. So we spoke about generative AI, what it is. We also spoke about India and what's going on from a macroeconomic factors point of view. If you look at the impact which generative AI can have across various sectors, I personally think every sector will be impacted. Certain sectors may be more impacted than others. And EY put out an excellent report, and I'm just quoting from there, which speaks about gross value addition across different verticals. When we speak about business or finance or healthcare or education or retail or supply chain or media, all of these aspects are already getting impacted. Between the ranges of 5 to 25% is EY's estimate This is gross value addition across all these verticals. Now, all of these will have specific use cases. Perhaps in finance, it would be able to detect fraud better. Maybe in business, it would be able to give you better ideas and innovation. In healthcare, it may just help in better diagnosis, and so on and so forth. In media, we're already seeing the impact where content can now get created a lot faster.
Definitely, it's huge.
Yeah. So when you think of all of these verticals using GenAI, there is going to be a lot of value addition, which will translate into value for the economy. And again, according to estimates, it's supposed to be growing at north of 40% CAGR for the next 6 to 7 years. And if we are able to continue on this trajectory as a country, then we would end up adding at least $1 trillion to our economy by the end of this decade. So that to me is really powerful impact for the Indian economy, keeping in mind a few other things which of course have to go right. We have to keep the privacy and security question in mind. We also have to be very mindful of the kind of guardrails we put in, and we see that happen often, right? There's copyright infringement, there's a lot of misinformation which comes on the back of generative AI.
Yes.
In addition to that, we also have to ensure that we have the necessary infrastructure within the country to be able to support this growth. And we already see that happening with semiconductor manufacturing, data centers being set up, as well as the government taking a keen interest in policies and regulatory frameworks. So I personally think if we put generative AI and India together, this is not just going to be our decade, it'll probably be our century.
Right, that's huge, and it has a really wide impact in terms of economical different sectors. So my next questions to you, it might be interesting, but then at the same place it is kind of scary. So in what ways do you think the current regulatory environment influences the development and adoption of GenAI in India? And how can regulatory frameworks can be structured to encourage technological advancements and also prevent their misuse?
Right. This is an important question, and I think it's a question on everybody's mind. I'd like to take an example here where I don't know if everyone is aware of this, but when ChatGPT had launched, a lot of countries were unsure about letting ChatGPT and such a powerful technology be available to their population. And Italy, in fact, banned ChatGPT temporarily before ChatGPT made corrections and amendments, and then the Italians again got access to ChatGPT. So the impact of generative AI is so widespread that now countries and governments are taking serious interest in understanding this technology, in being able to adopt it in a safe as well as reliable manner, and also they'd like to create frameworks and regulations so that they ensure that it is heading in the right direction, because it has a massive potential for misuse as well. So let's take examples from what's happening across the world in various countries. And these are again reports from BCG as well as from EY. An excellent piece of content which I just came across recently compared how the US is taking a stance on regulation on AI versus the EU, versus China, versus Saudi Arabia, versus UK. Other countries are still putting their heads together on how to regulate AI. And India is, of course, in the mix. In the US, they've taken a more self-regulatory free market approach, and they're looking at industry to come up with best practices and guardrails. Whereas in EU, there's a lot more scrutiny, where they're assessing risks, they're questioning transparency. They also are trying to ensure that there is human oversight on the development of these AI models. So if we take US on one end and EU on the other countries are basically lying between these two extremes. And China is now very clearly talking about compliance as well as guardrails from their own country perspective, and that's how China has always been approaching technology. With the UAE and the UK, they're looking at regulatory sandboxes to ensure that people can innovate safely. And India is, by the way, not lagging behind. We already have various initiatives in place. There was an AI Act which had come in 2018. Then the initiative taken by MeitY recently, they released something earlier in 2023 which speaks about India and AI. In between, there are a couple of other initiatives which the government has taken where they're very carefully examining what is happening across the world and then taking what I perceive are well thought out steps to ensure that we don't over-regulate and also to ensure that we don't put any guardrails in place. For example, a few things which I've seen being spoken about is that the government wants to ensure that we have critical infrastructure in place. If we do not have indigenous manufacturing, whether it's semiconductors or it's processors or it's data centers, then we'll always be relying on other countries or other companies. The government's also talking about free marketplaces where data can be traded and exchanged, but in a transparent manner. There's a lot of impetus on upskilling. We need everyone to understand how to use these technologies, and currently that's a need of the hour. So these are a few steps which the government is taking to ensure that they foster growth and innovation. I think on the other side, where I mentioned guardrails to you, we're also thinking of copyright infringement. We're also thinking of watermarking AI-generated content. And there is also a lot of thought into the ethical considerations of AI. So I think it's going to be a balance where we foster innovation on GenAI, but we also put in guardrails in place so that it doesn't get misused or it doesn't create chaos, because it has the potential. So that's my understanding of regulatory frameworks from what's happening in other countries and what I've understood India is doing.
So, or I think this Gen AI is not limited to one geography. What I believe is that policy thinkers have to sit together from across the globe, and then they need to come up with the regulatory. So country specific fine, then global AI regulation must be there. That's what I think.
And you're absolutely right. Recently there was a case against Midjourney, a very popular text-to-image creation tool, where a lot of artists came together and spoke about how Midjourney is infringing on their copyrights. Of course, there's a lot of insecurity as well as angst against these tools because they've been taking a lot of data from various open sources, they've been training the models, and now they're able to create these things pretty quickly. And it'll be interesting to see how these kind of verdicts play out, because countries will be looking at verdicts from across the globe to be able to influence and shape their own policy. And while Midjourney may have been created in the US, but we know so many people, including us, who are using it here in India.
Yes.
So there is no, as you mentioned, right, there is no country-only view on this. It has to be almost at a global level. Countries have to come together and think about this very, very deeply.
Absolutely. So I think we have discussed way much on regulations, but it's very important.
Yeah.
So my next question is to you: what challenges can GenAI possibly pose to businesses, and which sector could witness the most negative impact from GenAI?
Let's speak about a few different sorts of challenges when it comes to GenAI. And while it has its pros, it also has its cons. Like anything else, I personally think technology is neither good or bad. It depends on use cases, it depends on how we choose to employ it. Now, when we speak about challenges, I think a few standout challenges are there will be certain amount of displacement of the workforce. And the reason why this is already happening is because repetitive tasks are getting automated. And we see that happen with content creation, we see that also happen with data entry, we see that happen with customer service. So we need to really think about how to upskill a lot of these people who may not be able to compete with what generative AI is currently offering. And that is definitely a challenge for any business. The other challenge which a business might face, and this is again from personal experience, because when we go and speak to different sorts of institutions about generative AI, there is always a mix of fear and excitement. The fear comes from the unknown, but the excitement comes from the promise.
Yes.
Because they've seen what it can do, or at least they've heard about it. This poses a challenge to these brands from a adoption as well as from a security standpoint. Now, we hear this from a lot of brands where they speak about data privacy. There is a lot of proprietary data which brands sit on, but they would not like to share that with generative AI tools, despite knowing that they can get a lot of insights and analysis from that.
Right.
And there were various cases, I don't want to name brands, but a very popular phone brand came into the light because a lot of their employees were using proprietary data within GenAI tools before they were asked not to. So the first, of course, risk, as I mentioned, is workflows, displacement and upskilling. The second is purely from a data security and privacy point of view, where brands have to think hard about what sort of guardrails or what sort of measures will they put in place to ensure that their data remains secure, to ensure that their data remains private. I think the third thing would be, sector specific, I'd say. And this is related to the second question which you said, which kind of businesses or industries will get impacted more. Now, I personally think the IT sector, it's already getting impacted. And I can give you a few examples. India is a hub of IT export. Website development is one of the things which India exports a lot.
Yes.
A lot of that can now be done with GenAI pretty easily. This is just one example. Many large IT service firms are not hiring as much as they were earlier. In fact, they're not just not hiring, they're also actively or quietly firing. And you see that come in the papers all the time.
Yes, a lot.
And a lot of that is happening because slowly there is generative AI coming into the fore, and they're understanding how adoption of these tools can at least remove the routine tasks for them. So whether it is base level coding, or it is website designing, for instance, and many other specific things which an IT company would provide. The other sector which I think is potentially going to get disrupted is the customer care segment. We have a lot of BPOs and customer care outlets being run out of India, and a lot of this can get impacted. In addition to that, I think the entire media and entertainment business, currently we see text and images which are coming to us through generative AI. Soon we'll have audio as well as video. So thinking hard about what an existing animation studio or a video production house or a content writing firm would do is important. And that's where I think in the short term you'd see impact. But I personally feel that this is another cycle of evolution where a lot of these firms will learn or adopt GenAI to ensure that they just become more efficient. So that's my sense from a current standpoint. Things may change. Things change very quickly in GenAI.
Right. So I think you beautifully described this question. Now my next question to you is, what ways GenAI acting as a game changer for small medium enterprises, and how should small businesses leverage this GenAI to optimize the full potential of these tools?
Right, and that's a great question. And it also speaks to what we do, because for almost 12 years I worked with the largest brands across the world. And when we started our ventures, we realized that there is such great lack of awareness and know-how with startups and small and medium enterprises, where if we can just bring them the same tools, the same know-how, the same access, they'll be able to do magic. And we see that happen with a lot of the partners we work with. Now, for me personally, small and medium businesses and startups are the two propellers of our economy. And the reason why I say that is because having worked with MSMEs as well as startups, we've seen how MSMEs in fact contribute about 30% of our GDP. And startups, by the way, contribute to job creation. They also bring in a lot of investment. They also create a lot of aspiration. Look at what's happening in the country, and I end up going to a lot of colleges and institutions where people want to build something of their own now, which was not the case when I was in college. At that point in time, we aspired to be in a great MNC. And right now, I don't see that as a North Star anymore. A lot of people want to be able to create something of their own. So to me, when we look at an SME or we look at a startup, these are powerful growth engines for our economy. And in the case of both, whether it's SMEs or startups, there are certain commonalities. And what is common between them? Again, from my experience, we've worked with almost half a dozen MSMEs and a number of startups. Almost all SMEs and startups are always short of resources. That's something I've seen in my experience. The second thing is they believe in frugality. They want to do more with less. And that's the nature of a startup or an SME. This changes when you become a very large brand. And I've seen large brands from the inside, so I can say that. The third thing is often enough they lack awareness as well as guidance. So those three things are pretty common between these two. And I think with GenAI we can address a lot of what MSMEs and startups actually need. Personally, to an MSME or to a startup, I'd say look at generative AI from three different lenses. The first is start thinking of how do you strategically integrate generative AI into your business, and I'll give a few examples. The first is thinking of specific use cases, and there are many use cases. Let's say content creation for social media is a use case which is common for both startups and SMEs. Now, generative AI can very easily come in and automate a lot of this aspect for these brands. Ensure that you run pilots, small experiments, just to see how generative AI is able to add efficiency to your business. And the third thing I'd say is ensure that you have your workforce educating themselves on GenAI, or you ensure that there is active upskilling happening within GenAI. So that's where I'd say strategic integration is important for these brands. The second thing where a lot of this can create efficiency and value for both small businesses as well as for startups is customer operations and marketing, where you can now have personalized conversations with all your customers, which may not have been possible earlier. You can now automate a lot of your drudge work away, whether it is customer service representation, or it is ensuring that there is communication which is going out to all your customers where it needs to go out to. So a lot of this operational management can easily be automated. Another aspect is marketing. It is now possible for you to create a marketing campaign from scratch using GenAI alone, where you can do research, where you can write copy, where you can create images, you can potentially even now going forward create video using generative AI. So the entire, I'd say, arc of storytelling from a marketing perspective can now to some degree be done by generative AI. So that's the second place where I'd say brands should, MSMEs as well as startups should consider using generative AI. The third thing, which I think irrespective of what size of brand you are or what kind of brand you are, is the ethical and the security consideration. Ensuring that you have strong guardrails on how GenAI is being used. I can share multiple instances. A lot of brands do not take care of the kind of data they end up sharing with LLMs. Often enough, they're also putting out generative AI content, and they're not really declaring it as such. And when a customer or a consumer finds out, they in fact have felt cheated. Where, oh, I didn't know that this was created by AI. So saying that this is created by AI, ensuring that there is transparency in place is important. So from a security and ethics standpoint, I think if MSMEs and startups can ensure that those things are put in place, they'd benefit a lot. So those three things, strategic integration, ensuring that from an operations and marketing perspective, they can bring in GenAI, and the third is the ethical and the security consideration.
So last but not least, my question to you: how do you envision the future of GenAI in the coming years?
This is a great question. I have been a fan of science fiction for a long time, and I'm personally very interested in what generative AI can do and where it would go. And having used it for over a year and a half, having taught it to brands, having implemented it for various organizations, and also now having spoken to a lot of people in this field, a lot of folks who are doing great work wherever they're sitting. I will quote a wise man who said that if you want to predict the future, then don't. But if you still have to predict the future, then look at the rate of change. How quickly are things changing? Now, when we look at the rate of change in the generative AI field, this is the very worst of generative AI right now, because it's only 1.5 years old. It's only getting better, and it's getting better faster. Very rarely do we see ecosystems or industries where the kind of pace of change generative AI is exhibiting was ever seen before. When it started, it was at GPT 3.5, then you got 4, now there is conversation of 5 coming. Earlier it was just OpenAI, but now you already have many other models. You have Llama from Facebook, you have Gemini from Google, you also have Anthropic and Claude, Midjourney. The names just keep coming.
Right.
And you may soon have Sora. So the pace of change is only increasing. So here's my point of view, and while I'm not in the speculations business, I'm in the GenAI business, I'm very happy being here. But I do have a point of view on where this all might go. And I always like to think of it on a few different dimensions, so I'll describe those dimensions to you. The first is from a hardware and software point of view. From a hardware point of view, the basic unit, which is a GPU, and we've all heard how NVIDIA is now growing its market cap because of the fact that everybody wants their GPUs. They're getting better. They're able to process more in the same small size chip. So from a hardware perspective, there is more processing power available. From a software perspective, all of these large language models are getting better because they're ingesting more data and more people are using it. So both from a what's outside and what's inside lens, things are improving and they're getting better. Today we only have it on desktops and laptops, and some people are probably using it on phones. And this is my second sort of dimension which I think of. It will very soon come to other surfaces. It can easily sit on your watch. It can be here on my glasses. I don't see any reason why a smart glass cannot have GenAI integration.
Right.
It could be on smart rings. A lot of people are wearing rings nowadays. And going beyond this, I personally think it doesn't have to stop at physical surfaces. It could even go into the augmented reality and virtual reality dimension, where just like in Marvel movies, you see Iron Man speak to Jarvis and a screen appears. To me, that augmented reality is also a possibility with generative AI. We've already seen GenAI being integrated with robots also. So that's the second dimension I think of, that from a hardware and software perspective, it's growing faster. And then from a surfaces perspective, it's going to multiple places. The third place which we already see happening is what the industry calls multimodal. Multimodal basically means it was earlier on text, now an image, will go to video, can also process audio, among other things. So whatever kind of symbology or whatever kind of lexicon we use, it's able to understand that and then potentially create in it. And I think the fourth thing where I personally think this is also expanding is specialization. Whether it's understanding medical research, or it's understanding legal advice, or it's understanding digital marketing, I foresee that in some time in the near future, we may have strong AI agents which are very well equipped to be able to handle expert-like conversations within specific fields. So those are the four places where I see a development happen, and when I project this out, then I think hardware and software is getting better. It will come to multiple surfaces. It is already multimodal, but it will truly become multimodal. And the fourth is it is going to get deeply specialized. So if we were to put all of this together, if we were to have this conversation maybe a few years down the line, I personally think it is possible that we might have an augmented reality screen appearing over here, where all of this conversation is getting recorded. It is also getting transcribed, it is also getting translated, and it is also getting converted to various formats within whether it's text or image or video, and it's also getting broadcasted at the same time. Simultaneously.
Oh.
That to me is a potential, and it can happen. So yeah, the future seems to be accelerating, but I am personally very excited because, as I've been saying often enough, that AI and I go better together, with of course all the caveats which this particular technology brings. So that's my point of view on the future.
Right. I think we're done with the questions, and I thank you very much for taking the time and adding value to our discussion for our audience specifically. So as we heard that the future of GenAI is bright, and we're just not talking it does have an economic value. So it's expected to reach 17 billion in 2030, like from 1.3 billion in 2023. So stay tuned for the more discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nisha, and thank you everyone. I'll only say as final closing words, generative AI is here to stay, and my suggestion, my advice and my request is that every one of us should be paying attention to generative AI and its potential use cases. Thank you so much for having me.
I would definitely be paying. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Well, then I've at least succeeded in a small manner. Thank you, Nisha.